Herodotus lived during the 5th century before the Common Era in ancient Greece. He wrote a narrative summarizing history as it was then known and describing many of the events of his own lifetime. Although direct discussion on his biases and epistemology is saved for the conclusion of the series, on this video you may learn details about a portion of his work. The 9th book, called Calliope, The Final Victory. You must recall that the prior book ended with the Athenians firmly rejecting Mardonius' alliance proposal. Also, I should remind you, Mardonius was the hawkish, glory-hungry general that stayed in Greece after Xerxes, the king, fled back to Persia. At this moment, Herodotus describes the Thebans as perfectly willing traitors to the Greek cause. Speaking to Mardonius,
they urged him not to advance further, but to sit down there and endeavor to subdue to himself the whole of Hellas without fighting. Send money to the men who have power in their cities, and thus sending thou wilt divide Hellas into 2 parties.
Of course, the prior describes what later became the Persian strategy. Luckily, for the time being, Mardonius did not follow the Thebans' counsel. He captures Athens for a second time. Like before, he did not have to fight for it. All the Athenians had once again left toward Salamis. Curiously, a certain man named Lycidas suggested that they should accept Mardonius' alliance. In response, the men of Athens stoned Lycidas to death, and later, when the women heard about it, they themselves went to his family and killed his wife. Yikes! Remember that this was the second time in less than 12 months that they were made refugees. I think it is understandable that they be angry. Herodotus, in turn, is very critical of the Spartans and the Lacedaemonians in general. He says that they grew confident and secure because the wall across the Corinthian isthmus was near completed. The Athenians, therefore, were the ones that had to send messengers to them. He quotes them speaking to the Ephors.
As for you, after having come then to great dread lest we should make a treaty with the Persians, so soon as ye learnt certainly what our spirit was, namely that we should never betray Hellas, and because your wall across the isthmus is all but finished, now ye make no account of the Athenians. For the present then, the Athenians have anger against you.
In return, the Spartan council debated until a foreigner, a Tegean, a man named Calliope who held high repute among them, said,
"If the Athenians are not friendly with us but are allies of the barbarian, then though a strong wall may have been built across the isthmus, yet a wide door has been opened for the Persians into Peloponnesus."
The Ephors agreed and sent their army commanded by Pausanias. The Argives warned Mardonius of the coming force, and he retreated as Attica lacked ideal ground for his horsemen. Once in Boeotia, near Thebes, the Persian commander disrespectfully cut down most of their fruit trees for the purpose of making a defensive fortification. Subsequently, some Thebans invited Mardonius and many of his associates to a feast and party. Once there, one of the Persians said to a Greek,
"Dost thou see these Persians who are feasting here, and the army which we left behind encamped upon the river? Of all these, when a little time has gone by, thou shalt see but very few surviving."
The Greek told the Persian that he should share his worries with Mardonius, and the Persian replied,
"The most hateful grief of all human grief is this, to have knowledge of the truth but no power over the event."
At the end of the video, I will show an aphorism I crafted from the sentence. Before the final battle, there is a heated skirmish as the Persians, the proper Persians, attacked a Greek position. They did so on horseback using bows and javelins. They repeatedly attacked and retreated until their captain, a man named Mecistios, was killed. As a result, they attacked in full force, trying to recover his body. Regardless, the body of the captain remained with the Greeks, and later they
Put the dead body in a cart and conveyed it along their ranks. And the body was a sight worth seeing for its size and beauty. Wherefore also the men left their places in the ranks and went one after the other to gaze upon Mecistios.
That is some Iliad stuff right there. LOL. For the final battle, it was assumed that the Spartans would command one of the flanks. However, there was a dispute between the Tegeans and the Athenians over who would command the other flank. The Tegeans argued that they had a historical, mythical precedent. Their claim had to do with Heracles, and it was common practice for them to hold the other flank when fighting in alliance with the Spartans. They ended their argument by saying,
"Therefore it is just that we have the other wing rather than the Athenians, for they have not achieved deeds such as ours, either new or old."
The Athenians in turn spoke of how they, with Theseus as king, had helped the children of Heracles and how they had combated the Amazonians. A surviving play of Euripides tells part of the story. You may also learn about it on this channel. Either way, they ended their argument with,
"Let it suffice about ancient deeds, even by reason of the deed wrought at Marathon alone we are worthy to have this privilege and others besides this, seeing that we are long of all the Hellenes fought in single combat with the Persians."
In the end, both sides let the Spartans choose, and these choose in favor of the Athenians. By the way, Aristides, Plutarch's great and noble, was given command of the Athenian flank. The total number of the Greek force was 38,700 hoplites, along with 69,500 light-armed men. Most of the light-armed men were Spartans. The historian has it that these were Helots. Such a thing would fly in the face of conventional knowledge about the Helots. Surely, they were not arming their slaves, thus. What Helots were these? I guess there are various possibilities about it. As for the combined force of the barbarians, it was around 30,000 men of various armors and weapons alongside the Greeks that fought with them. The historian says that he does not know how many Greeks they were, but he estimates around 5,000 hoplites. The Spartans tell the Athenians that they, the Athenians, should be the ones facing the Persian soldiers as they had already defeated them in the Battle of Marathon. The Athenians are glad at the proposal and say that they had considered such a thing but had not proposed it for fear of insulting the Spartans. Thus, the two change sides in the battle line so that Athenians will be against the Persians and the Spartans against the opposing Greeks. Yet, Mardonius, believing his Persians are superior and wishing to fight against the famed Spartans, also switches sides. This side switching then occurs and reoccurs until Mardonius sends a herald to the Spartans saying,
"Ye covered with fear, now therefore since ye were not the first to say this, we are the first, why do we not forthwith fight, ye on behalf of the Hellenes, since ye have the reputation of being the best, and we on behalf of the barbarians, with equal numbers on both sides. Whichsoever of us shall be the victors, let these be counted as victorious with their whole army."
The Spartans decline and Mardonius, feeling confident due to the Spartans' refusal, attacks. The Persians were on horseback, and thus some of them were able to bypass the Spartan position and choke up the well from which the allied army was drawing water. As a result, after a day of inconclusive fighting and skirmishing, the allies are forced to withdraw. Yet, a Spartan captain refuses to do so, claiming that doing so would be dishonorable. To make a long story short, the allied army accidentally divides, and the Spartans are therefore separated from the rest. Pausanias calls for Athenian aid, but they are blocked by an enemy division. Basically, the battle is fought in various places, not in a single location, and it is rather disordered. Regardless, of course, the Persians are defeated handedly by the Spartans. Herodotus provides the more obvious explanation.
Now in courage and in strength, the Persians were not inferior to the others, but they were without defensive armor, and moreover they were unversed in war and unequal to their opponents in skill. And they would dart out one at a time or in groups of about 10 together, some more and some less, and fall upon the Spartans and perish. Their manner of dress, without defensive armor, was a very great cause of destruction to them, since in truth they were contending light-armed against hoplites.
Yes, the fight was certainly light-armed, inexperienced, mainly forced, fighting against free, willing, heavily armed, and outstandingly trained men. That having been said, it should be kept in mind that the barbarian commanders, as all barbarian commanders, were aristocrats that either inherited their position or were chosen by a man that in turn had merely inherited his position. The Greeks, on the other hand, were serving under elected commanders. That too makes all the difference in the world. Either way, Herodotus calls Pausanias the victor of the most famous battle ever. On top of that, he indicates, and later we'll return to this point, that divinity might have played a role. Speaking of the goddess Demeter, he says,
I suppose, if one ought to suppose anything about divine things, that the goddess herself refused to receive them because they had set fire to her temple, that is to say the palace at Eleusis.
To be clear, for some unexplained reason the fleeing barbarians could not find the religious sanctuary where they would have been granted safety, LOL. Whereas the Spartans fought against the Persians and killed Mardonios, the Athenians fought against the Theban hoplites. Once they fled, the Thebans did not go with the rest of the barbarian army, rather they went directly to Thebes. The allies then began the job of breaching and capturing the defensive position that Mardonios had previously built. This was easy as the Athenians had plenty of experience attacking such fortifications. Either way, while the allies lost in total less than 200 men, the barbarians lost almost all 30,000. Subsequently, the historian describes at length how the remaining Persians were mopped up. Curiously, he says that the Spartan helots stole much of the loot, and excessive loot. He says that
the great wealth of the Aeginetans first came from this, that they bought the gold from the helots making pretense that it was brass.
That is, gold that the helots managed to steal from the loot. Another noteworthy thing is a remark by Pausanias. He assembled a dish of the Persians, using the captured loot, placed this lavish dinner beside the typical Spartan meal, and gathered the Greek commanders to show them.
I desired to show you the senselessness of this leader of the Medes, who having such fare as this, came to us who have such sorry fare as ye see here, in order to take it away from us.
Curiously, the body of Mardonios was lost, though Pausanias did not intend to do anything bad to it. Also, over time, many Greek cities that did not fight at the battle made their own fake funeral mounds. Meaning, they made mounds of earth without any bodies as if pretending to future generations that they too had fought for the liberation of all Greece. LOL. It is understandable. Then enters the story of the Thebans that fought against the allies. The allies besieged the city and drove it to famine. Eventually, the Thebans agreed to turn over the men that had fought against the allies, and Pausanias had them executed without any trial. As for what was happening at sea while the Battle of Plataea was fought, the Athenians, along with others, chased the remnants of the Persian fleet. The Persians, in turn, abandoned their ships and sought security in a land battle. The Greek commander, the other Spartan king named Leotychides, sailed close to the barbarian force and shouted out loud, as if he were sharing a plan with the Greeks serving under Persia. The writer explains that
the design in this act was the same as that of Themistocles at Athens, for it was meant that either the words uttered should escape the knowledge of the barbarians and persuade the Ionians, or that they should be reported to the barbarians and make them distrustful of the Hellenes.
Before this fight, news arrived to both armies that the Greeks were utterly victorious at Plataea. As such, the barbarians lost their courage, were defeated, and few managed to flee. The historian finds it remarkable that both fights took place near a temple to Demeter. Thus, he insinuates divine aid took place in the fight. Also, jocularly, he has it that both battles took place on the same day. Of this front, a debate ensues as to whether they should leave the Greeks in their islands or transport them to occupy the lands of those that had joined forces with the Persians. The Spartans wanted to begin moving the whole of the population. They were afraid that they could not protect them in case of a future Persian attack. Yet, the Athenians refused. As a result, the Samians, Chians, Lesbians, and other islanders were simply included into the Greek Defensive League. I should mention, on this channel you may also learn about the writings of people such as Sappho, the poetess, the 10th muse, that lived in the island of Lesbos. After this battle, the Spartan king sailed his men back, and the Athenians instead directed themselves to the Hellespont. Here they besieged a city and captured part of Xerxes' army. In the end, they brought back many spoils and pieces of the rope which was used to create the bridge across the continents. Finally, to end the book, all the prior segues into a story about Cyrus. You will remember that he was the first Persian king described in the first chapter of Herodotus' Histories. In this story, a man tells Cyrus that they should move the Persians to better, more fruitful land. Cyrus replies,
From lands which are not rugged, men who are not rugged are apt to come forth, since it does not belong to the same land to bring forth fruits of the earth which are admirable, and also men who are good in war.
Herodotus literally ends his book with this notion. I find it a bit surprising. Perhaps he did not mean this to be the last book. Perhaps it is a reference to the Athenian lack of fertile soil. Either way, this is the conclusion. I hope you did not miss the prior videos, otherwise you would not know how we got to this point. Likewise, you will have missed many of the aphorisms I crafted from this author's writings. In the overall analysis and critique video, I will mention some more aphorisms. Don't miss it. In fact, to entice your curiosity, take the following example.
Although some knowledge yields power, and some knowledge requires power to be known, most knowledge only lets you know how powerless you are.
If you enjoy or gain from my aphorisms, know that I have thousands. I will be writing books with short thematic essays composed out of aphorisms. These essays are profound and intriguing yet easy to read. For very cheap copies, look up Protagoras Pause in the Amazon website. I repeat, Protagoras Pause, that's my name.